All right, let's introduce Felicity Jones and Director Drake Doremus to the stage.
Hello.
All right, let's start. There's so many places to start. There's so much. I love the music in this film. It's so emotionally expressive in a way that I'm watching the trailer and I'm right back to where you placed the viewer. What was the inspiration to tell this story and direct this film?
Well, it definitely started with the music. By virtue of working with Dustin on Like Crazy, he's such an incredible composer. I first heard his work in Sofia Coppola's film Marie Antoinette, and a lot of the pieces in the movie were written before the movie was even made and inspired certain scenes and sequences and the tone and the mood and the world. And then also wanting to work with Felicity again and custom tailoring and writing a role for her again and wanting to do something different than Anna, a much darker, more mysterious character. So those two things were the catalysts for the film.
And Felicity, for you, music is a big part. But were you given music early? Like, how did you get involved into the? Obviously, you know Drake from the last film, which is terrific if you guys haven't seen it. But how did you use the music at all to inform the performance?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite intimidating at first when Drake said, "So I've written this film, and you have to be a concert pianist." It's like, great. Where do I start? So Drake, I remember you actually sent me a couple of tracks that Dustin had actually composed, just to give me an idea of the mood of the film. And I remember listening to those and just really liking that kind of melancholy tone in them. And then with the piano, I worked really closely with a coach who was this amazing concert pianist who taught me to look like I could play the piano. So it was a little bit of my skill and a lot of her skill.
Well, you could have fooled me. I'm sure you could have fooled some of the audience. I honestly thought you'd maybe at least done like piano growing up or something.
That's good. That's good.
Drake's like, yes.
We survived.
Yes, that's good.
Is that odd? Because in most cases you don't have the music beforehand when you've done the film, right? You have the screenplay, you have a director, and that's it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the music in the film really was a character in the film, so we really needed to have a lot of it on hand, and we had it for playback during a lot of the scenes. We always listen to music on set and think about it, but really in creating this sort of tone poem in a way, the music was going to be such a character.
And how much of it is written and how much of it is improvised? Because I know improvisation is a significant part of your work, right?
Yeah, we kind of did it a little bit differently than we did Like Crazy, actually. On this film, we had a really, really specific outline that was written by Ben York Jones and I, who's an incredible outliner writer. And we wrote about 65 pages, backstory, plot points, character, all that good stuff. And then in the rehearsal process, we kind of worked the scenes out and then did an enormous amount of improv on set. And then went back into the edit room and had about 2/3 of a movie. And then realized we needed to really kind of bring it together with structure. So we actually wrote scenes. Ben actually wrote about 6 or 7 scenes. We went back and shot for 3 more days and then plugged them in. So the movie was shot almost about 7 months apart, actually, which is a really cool way to do it because you can just keep writing and keep finding the characters and keep finding the story. So it's really fun to do as opposed to Like Crazy, which was done in such a vacuum for about 3.5 weeks and then it was over.
You usually don't have the luxury to go back 7 months later.
But when you're improvising as much as we are, things kind of take a turn and they grow and they change organically, and you kind of have to go back and keep tinkering with it until it's right, which is such a fun way to work.
Right. Felicity, what's your experience on that? You obviously worked with Drake in the last film, and you guys improvised, but how is it different? And working with this new cast, Guy and Amy, people that you hadn't worked with last time.
Well, yeah, I mean, it felt very, very different from the last film, obviously, because it's a completely new set of people. So each person brings a different way of working, in a sense. But it was, I mean, as ever with Drake, it's always just very relaxed. And I think that's why actors enjoy working with him, because you feel like you can take risks and you can try things out and you hopefully won't embarrass yourself. And so immediately we all felt very comfortable with each other. We had a week's rehearsal where we all sat and did some of the scenes and talked about the story. And I think the main objective with that was for us all to get comfortable with each other and get to know each other.
Did you do that on location too? Because I feel like the locations almost cover a character as well.
Yeah, very much so. We did do a good amount of work on the house, which is a character in the film as well. But unfortunately, we couldn't get into it because they were dressing it and redoing it. So we were in this loft in Brooklyn for about a week. We took over this person's apartment, and we rehearsed in there primarily.
Randomly.
Yeah, randomly.
But even it's like upstate or something, right?
Yeah. I mean, we shot in Seacliff, Oyster Bay, mostly Long Island, a little bit of Staten Island, but it's supposed to be upstate. Exactly.
Yeah, there's a wonderful mood to that. Just
incredible. I mean, being there in the summer and just the weather and the summer rains and the mood and the leaves in the tree, it's just such an incredible energy and mood.
And the earthquake. There was an earthquake.
Oh, yeah.
Which was pretty scary.
And there was a hurricane.
And a hurricane. So that added to the emotion and
it was crazy.
Intensity of the film.
Maybe we should show a clip. I love the struggle that Guy's going through there, just mostly on his face. Even this guy doesn't have to be saying any of this, and he's still got his own.
We were just discussing out of context. The scene seems lecherous almost in many ways, but it's obviously not in the film. But yeah, he does. I mean, Guy's such an incredible actor and chameleon, and he was improvising a good amount of the dialogue in a foreign dialect, something he'd never done before. He'd never even improvised in a film before, so he deserves a tremendous amount of credit for embracing the process and really becoming the character.
Did you ever have to, Felicity? Did you ever have to be because you've worked with Drake, you know the process, and you've got 2 new actors, at least 3 new main actors who haven't worked in that process before. Did you ever have to communicate, or this is how it's done?
What, sort of be a teacher?
Yeah, or be the go-between sort of thing. I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, do this. No, don't. Actually, no, they were all so amazing at it. I mean, they just were so. I think it's a lot of actors, even in scripts that are fully scripted. There's a lot of improvisation. I think a lot of people are actually more used to doing it than you might think, and they're all extraordinary actors. So they all seem to take to it quite easily.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kyle and Amy, and you've got Alex Wentworth. I mean, everyone's so improvisational.
Let's talk about music and character, how they work together at the beginning of the trailer, so there is some context. The beginning of the trailer, as you guys saw, he's like, play something for me. And she's like, I'm not ready. And she plays this, and there's this whole dialogue that's going on there that she does just by playing as a sort of, fuck you. Can you talk about that a little bit? How that took shape?
Yeah, I mean, the movie really is about breaths in a sense, and between the musical movements and between the characters, there's so much that's unsaid, and there's so much that's going on between Guy's character and Felicity's character throughout the course of the movie that sort of the guy sort of rediscovers his passion and what he's really on this earth to do and really all about, and she sort of brings that out in him. So it's really a romantic tale in a way about rediscovering your passion for what you do in life, in a sense, and as opposed to some sort of younger woman, older man story. I mean, that's the context and the simplicity of it, but really at the end of the day, it's so much more complex.
Mm-hmm. Was it hard for you guys as the actors to play those moments that are like really like a lot of internal life going on, a lot of internal dialogue without dialogue, emotional dialogue sort of?
Yeah, I think that's something I always like in films is when emotions are communicated without dialogue, and I feel like this film there is a lot that they can't say to each other. I think they're 2 characters who just have an understanding of each other. They have an empathy, and it's that connection that people often have that you can't really explain, and I think that was important in the film to show that it's, even though there's an age gap between them and they're very different people, there's just this sort of, there's a connection.
What was both of your, I'm sure they're different, but biggest challenges for you besides learning how to fake piano?
I think that was the number one challenge, was making it look like I could play Beethoven's 9th Sonata, which would actually take you about 15 years to learn. I think the challenge for me and what we wanted to do was to make Sophie, to bring out someone who was quite troubled, and there's there's a lot of anger in her, and I like that about her when I read her. You know, she's not instantly likable. You have to work with her a little bit, and I quite like the challenge of that.
Drake, what were your biggest challenges in making this one?
Gosh, I mean, I think just it, like it always is. It's really difficult when you have an outline as specific as it is, and as much as we can get in there. It's just scenes just sometimes either work right away or they take forever to work. So we'd go in and sometimes the most difficult scene that I'm worried about just suddenly just starts working and then we've got it. And then other times scenes that are, 1/8 of a page take 4 hours to do because they're just not working. We have to rethink them or reshoot them on a different day. So I think just the process is just, constantly really hard. But what it does yield is really beautiful and truthful performances because they're unhinged and they're very, open. But I think that process has gotten me to the point where I'm, starting to think about doing it a little bit differently. But it's so exciting, but also really stressful.
Yeah, the intimacy and naked sort of moments in the movie are quite something, as you say. Will you always work like that? Is there pressure like that? Could you keep working like that all the time?
I mean, I think that there's a hybrid version that will always be there for me. I think I'm gravitating towards more scripted material because it is exciting to think of it already on the page working, and then you can go ahead and play with it and change it and make it better as you go. But the idea of not having dialogue on the page is stressful for us, but it's been such a fun way to work. It's just you're almost working backwards. You're almost writing the movie in the edit room, like a documentary, and you're just shooting as you're going. But this movie was really special because Guy and Felicity had such a different energy together than Anton and Felicity did. So it really just felt like a totally different world that we were in.
Did you have to read them together at first for chemistry?
No, I mean, I called you and I was meeting with actors and I said, well, who do you like? And she really liked Guy. And
Brad Pitt wasn't available.
Yeah, Brad Pitt.
So,
we didn't put him out.
Yeah.
Or as Guy would say, Hugh Jackman wasn't available. Yeah.
But you guys didn't have a chemistry test? Because, I mean, could you imagine if
no,
you
they
guys...
they met the first day
it's
of
called
rehearsal.
acting.
Okay, you fooled me.
Yeah, they met like a week before we started shooting. I mean, it was pretty quick.
Let's watch the second clip.
Obviously, that's the comedic break in the film right there.
You guys, no, honestly, you guys have dynamite chemistry. I mean, you guys are saying this out of context, but God, it's just killing me already. I'm 100% honest. Structure versus improv, which one do you prefer?
I think it depends on the filmmaker, and if obviously you wouldn't want to do improvisation with just anyone. No, it has to be with the right. It has to be with the right person.
You can tell me if he's not good at it.
He's wonderful. Yeah, it depends. It totally depends on the story you're trying to tell.
We should take some questions from the audience.
Do you like drama? Because this is very romantic in a way, but it's also got like intense drama. I just wanted to know that.
Do I like
drama?
Myself? Yeah, I do. In terms of the kinds of films I like to see, or is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. No, I love a good story.
I can tell this is very well made. You're a great actress.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, how are you guys? Thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having us.
I'm just wondering how long... well, first of all, I really enjoyed Like Crazy. I always describe it as an emotional punch. It feels like a punch in the face because of the connection you create and because of directing. But yeah, so for Breathe In, I'm wondering how long you shot for originally, because I know you said you reshot for 3 days. And I remember like back in 2011 working as an extra. It was like the end of the summer and it was one of those rainy days. So I was waiting, for a while. If I was following.
Awesome. You're in the film?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I was just in the back. It was
That's
one of the high school
fucking great.
scenes,
What scene are you in?
I don't know. It was in one of the high school scenes, but
Awesome. I only got to figure that out.
but yeah, I had worked on it. I liked Like Crazy a lot, and I was following the film, so I was waiting.
Oh, man, that's so cool, man. What's your name, man?
Dan.
Dan?
Dan, yeah, Dan Grubb.
Yeah, nice to meet you, man. That's so
too.
cool. Thanks for coming. Well, yeah, we shot. I mean, as you were on set. We shot in the school for about a week. We were at the house for about a week and a half. I mean, total, we had about 4 weeks. I remember Guy had to leave in the middle to go to Venice to go promote Mildred Pierce. So he left for 2 days and then came back, which was kind of crazy. But we shot for a very short amount of time, 4 weeks, and then we took 6 months, edited, wrote a few scenes, wrote about 6 or 7 scenes that we knew we wanted to plug in between the material we had. And then we came back to New York, shot for 3 days, 2 or 3 days, 3 days, I think. And that was it. So, but it was a long process. It's like making a documentary. I mean, that's why it takes so long for, took so long for this movie to come out. And by the time we were at Sundance, we missed one Sundance, then we went to the next one. I mean, it's like making a doc almost, because you really are just trying to shoot real life scenarios and real life situations, and then you go into the edit room and you gotta really write it and find it. Because I mean, for instance, that reservoir scene that we just showed, I mean, we had hours and hours of material and dialogue that we ended up getting down to like a 3 or 4 minute scene. So it's a difficult process.
Hi, Drake and Felicity. Nice to see you.
Hello.
I was just wondering how it worked to be with a director like Guy Pearce himself. Does he wears 2 hats of actor and a director, and do you take inputs from him from that point of view, or how it works?
Guy has no input. He's a robot. Guy is an incredibly thoughtful human being and actor. And I mean, like I said, he'd never improvised in his life. So for him coming to this project, I think he was scared, but also excited to play and experiment. And he's a musician, so he really liked the idea of sort of jamming and making this character and creating this. But I mean, yeah, he's just very intellectual, very smart, very thoughtful. I mean, we had just so many conversations. I feel like we had so many more conversations about what was going on with Guy than we did with Anton. I mean, a lot of those scenes we just really talked about the emotional context and then just dove in and then worked on it. Whereas with Guy, we'd spend just hours talking about what's going on in the scene and the context and what's, he's just really an incredibly smart guy.
And I'd say Guy fully immerses himself, doesn't he, in the character and the story. He completely he sort of changes for that time that you're shooting.
There's an intensity to him on set. He's a very fun-loving, funny, goofy, relaxed person. Then when he's in the moment and he's in character, there's an intensity to him that is really, really amazing to watch and be around.
I'd like to hear more about your story, about your prospect of your personal prospect to be here in America.
Yeah, I think it's something that people find when you come from all over the world and you come to America. It's a place that we've all grown up watching on films and TV programs. So when you're here, you always feel like you have to pinch yourself. You feel like you're in a movie, just walking down the street. But I've always loved coming here. I think it's what a lot of people find. You suddenly feel like, actually breathe. It's weird. You feel like you can breathe because all the sort of constraints that you have back at home and don't seem to apply here sometimes, that you are very much taken as you are, which I really like, in a way that England is very different in that there's sort of different rules and ways of being, and there's something very freeing about being an English person in the States.
Okay, hi, how you doing? For the director,
Cheers, man.
How you doing? Did with the scene with Allie, the act, Allie?
Yeah, Ali Bummer. Yeah.
Were you trying to make them seem like the marriages were exhausted? They
What was exhausted?
Their marriages were exhausted. They were just like, 17 years.
absolutely.
Oh my God, retired. Could someone?
Yeah, I think one thing we were really interested in examining was the grayness of marriage. Not that it was exhausted and done and it had failed, or that it was bad, and not that it was like it was at the beginning. I mean, that's I think the difficulty of sometimes, being in a long-term relationship is you have to sort of balance that understanding that these people are just safe. They're not taking risks, and they're not pushing themselves as human beings. They're just sort of floating along, and I think that's interesting. The interesting thing about where Guy is in his life in the film.
Felicity comes and really changes his world.
Yeah, I mean, it just reawakens him to a part of himself that he had sort of forgotten.
All right, thank you so much for coming out. Let's thank
you,
Drake
guys.
and Felicity, and
Thank
Cheers,
you very
guys.
much.
all right, let's introduce Felicity Jones and Director Drake Doremus to the stage.
Hello.
All right, let's start. There's so many places to start. There's so much. I love the music in this film. It's so emotionally expressive in a way that I'm watching the trailer and I'm right back to where you place the viewer. What was the inspiration to tell this story and direct this film?
Well, it definitely started with the music. By virtue of working with Dustin on Like Crazy, he's such an incredible composer. I'd first heard his work in Sofia Coppola's film Marie Antoinette, and
Part of your work, right?
yeah, we kind of did it a little bit differently than we did Like Crazy. Actually, on this film, we had a really specific outline that was written by Ben York Jones and I, who's an incredible outliner writer. And we wrote about 65 pages, backstory, plot points, character, all that good stuff. And then in the rehearsal process, we kind of worked the scenes out and then did an enormous amount of improv on set. And then went back into the edit room and had about 2/3 of a movie. And then realized we needed to really kind of bring it together with structure. So we actually wrote scenes. Ben actually wrote about 6 or 7 scenes. We went back and shot for 3 more days and then plugged them in. So the movie was shot almost about 7 months apart, actually, which is a really cool way to do it because you can just keep writing. A lot of the pieces in the movie were written before the movie was even made and inspired certain scenes and sequences and the tone and the mood and the world. And then also wanting to work with Felicity again and custom tailoring and writing a role for her again and wanting to do something different than Anna, a much darker, more mysterious character. So those 2 things were the catalysts for the film.
And Felicity, for you, music is a big part. But were you given music early? Like, how did you get involved into the? Obviously, you know Drake from the last film, which is terrific if you guys haven't seen it. But did you use the music at all to inform the performance?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite intimidating at first when Drake said, "So I've written the."
Or something.
That's good. That's good.
Drake's like, yes.
We survived.
Yes, that's good.
Is that odd? Because in most cases, you don't have the music beforehand when you've done the film, right? You have the screenplay, you have a director, and that's it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the music in the film really was a character in the film, so we really needed to have a lot of it on hand, and we had it for playback during a lot of the scenes. We always listen to music on set and think about it, but really in creating this sort of tone poem in a way, the music was going to be such a character.
And how much of it is written and how much of it is improvised? Because I know improvisation is a significant.
This film, and you have to be a concert pianist. It's like, great. Where do I start? So Drake, I remember you actually sent me a couple of tracks that Dustin had actually composed, just to give me an idea of the mood of the film. And I remember listening to those and just really liking that kind of melancholy tone in them. And then with the piano, I worked really closely with a coach who was this amazing concert pianist who taught me to look like I could play the piano. So it was a little bit of my skill and a lot of her skill.
Well, you could have fooled me. I'm sure you could have fooled some of the audience. I honestly thought you'd maybe at least done like piano growing